Welcome to After the Pull, the video series where I share all my thoughts and opinions on the rest of the comic books that I read for the current comic book week. I'm Mike Spider Slayer. This is Comic Book Corner 2.0. If you love daily comic book content and you like me helping you make decisions on what comic books to buy, you came to the right place. Consider hitting that subscribe button. Also, if you want to see my thoughts on all the newest #1 issues I read for the current comic book week, you can check out Worthy Ones, and that video is released on every Thursday, and I will release that video here at the end of this one. So with that being said, guys, let's get started with this week's episode. And as usually, guys, we're going to kick things off with the speed round. This is the books that weren't necessarily maybe the greatest or the worst, but not a lot to discuss, right? So the first book we're going to talk about here is Gunslinger Spawn. This is issue 36. Always a pretty solid book, but this particular issue I felt really didn't have all that much story progression, right? We wind up getting to see Gunslinger wake up from his coma. He gets represented from a lawyer. We kind of get this as a book where it's almost like a jumping on point as we get the weird voodoo guy that's working with Gunslinger explaining to Linda like who he actually is and where he comes from and stuff. So again, not a bad book, but I would say this is more for newer readers. So if you haven't read Gunslinger Spawn, this might be the issue for you to check out. The next book we're going to talk about is a book that I currently read. I don't know how many of you guys out there read it. This is Plastic Death and Dolls. This is issue 5. This is the conclusion to this series, and we kind of got to see the origin story of Edwin, right? Edwin is this serial killer, and there's things that trigger him that commit these horrible murders. And it feels like it comes from a good place because everything reminds him of his mother on why he does certain things. Of course, he's not playing with a full deck. It's kind of disturbing, but in this series, you've gotten to see everything lead up into this point on why he is that he is. So, if you're looking for something different, check out Plastic. I'm sure you'll see trades for that one. All right, another book where I would not recommend at this point, it's Venom. This is issue 38. This is the Venom War tie-in as we get to see Venom go to Doctor Strange, and he goes to another character to help him out with this crazy future that he experienced. So if he takes care of things in the past, maybe that future won't happen. It's kind of like a Terminator effect. You wind up getting to see Dylan looking like old man Cable or an old man Logan. He's that type of character. Not a very interesting comic book. I almost have to slap myself in the face to keep myself awake to read this comic book. It's just not good right now, and I cannot wait until a lot of this Venom War stuff is over so we can move on. The next book we're going to talk about here is Exceptional X-Men. This is issue 2. So when it comes to Exceptional X-Men, we almost get more of the same here with Kitty Pryde. She's goes on a date this time, where last time she didn't go on a date, and it's on this to the soccer game, right? And then there's a couple more mutants that she comes across, and you can't help but her actually helping these mutants. It's like in her DNA to help these people. She's just a good person, and you wind up seeing that. And I think eventually you're going to wind up seeing a team form, and you get to see Emma Frost and things like that. But it wasn't really that special in my eyes, but I'm going to continue to actually read it. The next one we're talking about here is DC vs. Vampires World War V. This series will be a drop. What kept this on life support for me was actually when we had the last issue where we have sexy vampire Wonder Woman doing battle against Alfred, and that left with a crazy cliffhanger of him being a Green Lantern, right? And then they fight with each other in the beginning of this issue, and then he kind of takes off. And then from there on out, it just gets completely boring. The artwork tries to be what the last series was, but it does not work, man. can't get into this volume of DC vs. Vampires, which is unfortunate because the first volume was way better than this one. So this is a pass. Then we have Scarlet. This is issue 5. This is the conclusion to this series, and this has been my least favorite, unfortunately, G.I. Joe Energon book that there actually is. I felt that the conclusion to this was very anticlimactic. We wind up getting Storm Shadow gets this sword, and it's obviously attached to Energon. Nothing really like, oh my god, that's so freaking awesome. So to me, this was very lackluster, just like almost the whole entire series. I didn't feel like there was a really strong plot here. So yeah, if you've been on the fence about buying this when it comes out in trade, I don't know. I don't think you need to buy it. And then we got the new DC All-In Action Comics. This book is going to go weekly from this point forward. And I think this story was actually pretty good. I just don't know if it's worth a weekly purchase. It's going to cost you $20 a month to buy this comic book. So it's like you really got to buy into the story, and you find out that there's like a crack in like the Phantom Zone machine that he has, or something breaks through it and it's a creature or whatever it is, and he prevails, which is kind of cool. But in order to prevent these things from happening in the future, he's got to go into the Phantom Zone. Now, those adventures could be kind of cool, right? But again, does the story really blow you away to the point going, man, I'm going to spend $20 a month on this comic book? So I don't know. And then at the end, you're going to wind up getting a Supergirl book, or a Supergirl story in here, which is done by Tamaki, I think. And the introduction to that story wasn't the greatest for me. So I don't know if I'm going to be continuing with Action Comics going forward. It's going to be, I guess, dependent on the comic book week, but I don't know if it comes on every week. I don't know, man. It could be a hard pass. DC presents Batman and Robin. Are you all in? This is issue 14. 32 pages for the price of $5. This one now is written by Philip Kennedy Johnson, and the art is done by Javier Fernandez. I think Philip Kennedy Johnson has some big shoes to fill when it comes to this series. I thought Joshua Williamson did a pretty decent job with the last series, and I don't know if this is a book that I will be continuing, whether it was good or bad, because there's a lot of Batman, and I can only read so much Batman, and I don't know if this book should have been released on the same week as Absolute Batman, right? But when you look at the artwork in here, the artwork when it comes to like the fighting scenes, the chase scenes, I thought were actually very good. And when you have like Batman and Damian together when they're side by side fighting, I thought that looked really good, right? But then once the action slowed down and they get out of their masks and stuff, I don't know, there was just something off about it. It didn't look right to me. And you wind up getting to see Damian as he's just like real bratty in this issue. They're supposed to go to this like dinner or whatnot, and Damian doesn't want to. He wants to be on a patrol. There were some fun interactions here between him and a little girl at the kids' table, right? And then there was a situation that happens that, you know, Bruce has to take care of, right? But there wasn't anything here that was just like, oh my gosh, this is so good. Like, I gotta jump on Batman and Robin right now as he's taking on this new threat. There wasn't anything here that was just new and super exciting, right? It was a little bit darker maybe than Joshua Williamson's run, which, yeah, I don't have a problem with that because it is a Batman book. But again, when you have a lot of Batman books out and you just got Absolute Batman that was released, you know, if you can only pick between the two, what would you pick? This or Absolute Batman? So at the end of the day, if I had to grade this one was average for me. I'm just going to give it a C, and I'm probably going to pass on it going forward. The Ultimates. This is issue 5. This is a 32-page comic for $5. Written by Denise Camp, and the art is done by Juan Frigeri. The artwork is pretty good. I wouldn't say it's the best, but it's okay, man. Again, just like Batman and Robin, I felt like when they draw the human faces, I feel like they could be better. But then when they put on the masks, I just feel like the characters look much better, especially our new Hawkeye in this comic book, which I think he's pretty much a badass, dude. I was impressed with this comic book, with the way he looked and just the way they introduced all the different types of arrows, right? Every arrow that is used in this comic book, there's a little description of it. There's like Sonic Screamer arrow, and then there's just like, what else is there? The repulsor arrow, the acid arrow, the freeze arrow. And I just had fun with this Hawkeye actually doing battle against Captain America and getting Cap to almost have this Hawkeye join their actual team. And originally Iron Lad is like, yeah, the guy that I wanted this Hawkeye equipment to go to just kind of left it there. He wanted nothing to do with it. And now this random dude picks it up and he is on like the lowest scale of being good. He's more like an actual villain. So throughout the entire time, you're seeing these two combat with each other, and he likes to compare things like cowboys and Indians and how the cowboys always win. And it was just a great read, and I just like the pacing of the Ultimates right now. I like how every month represents a new team member being introduced, and I'm okay with that until we get to, you know, the Maker making his return here. So this book is awesome for me. I really like it. Every month it's something fun and new and different when it comes to these versions of these characters. So I'm gonna give this one a A-. I thought it was great. I just had so much fun learning about this new Hawkeye. I Heart Skull Crusher issue 6 is the next book we're talking about. A $5 comic written by Josie Campbell. The art is done by Elizio Zano. The artwork is always really good in this comic. Reminds me of like an anime or a manga. I love Trini. Her facial expressions is priceless in this comic book. You really get to feel what she's going through in this comic, and just all the action sequences in here and the paneling is really good. This is just a fun comic book of a young female who's always wanted to be part of this Screaming Paintball League, right? And she wanted to meet her idol, and now all those things finally came true, and it's not what it seems to be, you know what I'm saying? And she's forced not to work with her team again, and somehow she wants to get back with her team, and she's against all odds in this comic book, and of course she's figuring out a way to go against those odds. I thought this was a really well done comic book once again. If you're a new reader to this is coming off a break, so you're not going to get what's going on so much in this comic book, and you could be a little bit confused. And I think what the book should have done was give you a little bit of a synopsis in here, but they didn't give you anything to remind the reader, hey, this is what's going on, this is what this comic book is about. And I feel like when it comes to these indies, they really need to do that so they can get readers to jump on board. Overall, great series. I'm going to give this one a B+. I can't wait to see what's next for Trini and this team. Minor Arcana, this is issue 2. This is a $5 comic book written and drawn by Jeff Lemire. Jeff Lemire definitely has his own distinct art style, so you'll know what his artwork is when you open up a Jeff Lemire comic. His books are always way out there and weird. They take you to these different worlds, right? And we get introduced to the character here. I totally forgot her name off the top of my head here. And she's comes back to town to take care of her sick mother, right? Her mother was a tarot reader, and one day you wind up seeing this older lady come, and she says, I need my cards read and this and that. And her mom was asleep and she's sick, and she's like, I've watched my mom do this 1,000 times. So she starts reading this lady's cards, right? And it takes her to this different land. And in fact, the place that she goes is the lady's husband when he was much younger. And she's like, what the heck? She's like, I don't even know how I even got here, right? And then she winds up going back to the real world. She kicks the lady out. She's like, get out of here. She does not know what to do with this information that just happened. And she is a recovering alcoholic. She's been sober for so long, and she falls off the wagon on here, which is unfortunate. But we'll see the direction of where this comic goes going forward. Quite interesting story. Like I said, Jeff Lemire takes things in a weird way, but it's a solid read. I'm going to give this one a B-. I wish there was a little bit more story progression. He tends to drag his stories out a little bit, slow burn, right? But I'm in it for the long haul here. We'll see what happens with the next issue. Space Ghost. This is issue 6, 32 pages for the price of $5. This book is written by David Pepose and the art is done by Jonathan Lau. Man, when it comes to this comic book, dude, it continues to impress as Space Ghost is doing battle in this issue against Moltar. He's like this fire guy, and I think I briefly remember this dude. He's got like these molten men, and we just get to see this crazy battle happen between all of our cast of characters except Jace. Jace is the one that's suffering through kind of like this PTSD. He's suffering through what, you know, it is to be a hero, how there can be real life consequences, and he doesn't want to deal with it. And we get to see, you know, his sister trying to help him along to try to recover, maybe do things that they can find him be helpful where it's not taking other people's lives. And this was a very heartfelt story, and I really enjoyed it. It really hits the heart here. You can feel that family dynamic when it comes to the comic, and at the end of the day, they do defeat the Moltar character, and we see that Space Ghost actually is responsible for what happened with Jace in the previous issue. This is a phenomenal read, man. This is a top pick for me. It's going to be an A+. I always enjoy Space Ghost each and every month it comes out. Geiger, issue 7, 32 pages for the price of $4. You got the writer here is Jeff Johns. Andrew Hennessy is the fill-in artist in this particular issue, which I feel like is a very like character-driven issue. Doesn't really progress the story all that much, but the artwork is serviceable. It's not quite as detailed as who does this? Is it Gary Frank? I think it is. Right? It's not quite the same, but it is still pretty good. And we wind up getting to see Nate, Nuclear Knight, Zigzag, Barney, Tyreek travel together, and they wind up coming across some other bad guys from Vegas, I think it was, like other knights, and they're taking on Nate, the Nuclear Knight. And, you know, Nate is like this very charismatic. He looks for the best out in people. He tries to save them, and he tries to prove that Geiger is a hero. And Geiger has to do what he has to do in tough situations. And you get to see, you know, that he is becoming more softer in the comic book and in the series. They come across these kids, they rescue these kids, and they bring them back to where they have to go, which I thought is actually pretty cool. It's a fun book. It leaves you with a great cliffhanger here with a potential bad guy at the end, maybe the new king that can go after the glowing man, right? But overall, Geiger's always a phenomenal read. I wouldn't say that this is the best issue. Like I said, it doesn't progress the story all that much, but it always has heart, and feels like it's a family book these days. So I'm gonna give this one a B+. What'd you think of this issue of Geiger? The Amazing Spider-Man. This is issue 59. This book is $5, and it's done by Zeb Wells, and the art is done by Jed Bermuda Jr. Again, this is continuing this fight that is, you know, Spider-Man and Tombstone going after Janice. Same exact vibe you're going to get in tone from the last issue. You're going to get a lot of close-ups when it comes to John Bermuda Jr.'s artwork. And this book, I mean, it's kind of cool how it continues in the cover. I'll give it that. There were some, you know, cool fight scenes. There's okay art at times, but the dialogue, there's no dialogue in here. Not that I'm looking for all that when it's this crazy intense fight scene, but it's like, let go of her. No. Yes. I said stop. I said this. There's literally one word in each panel, right? And it goes to the point where they just sit there and collapse on the floor. And that's kind of how the issue ends. It will literally take you 3 minutes. This is like a drag, a stall until you get to the final issue of Zeb Wells' run, which I feel he should be closing up any loose ends, ties, like what's going on with Paul. Is he dying? Is he living? What happened to Black Cat? What happened to Robbie? Like what happened to all these other characters that were in this series? I mean, granted, I love Tombstone and I love the street level stuff, probably the best that Zeb Wells has done, but to conclude this like this, it just doesn't feel like it really offers anything. I don't know, man. We'll see in this last issue, but thank God it's almost done. At the end of the day, this one gets a D. Transformers issue 13, one of my favorite books on the stands right now. 28 pages for the price of $4. We get the first appearance of Omega Supreme Overcharge. Genvo, I think, is the Transformer that is Starscream's like best buddy in this comic book. And we wound up getting our third artist on this book now, Jason Howard, which I think he's writing a couple of issues here. And I would say that he's not a bad artist for the comic, right? But I would say he is the weakest. The facial expressions in here just look almost too human-like. And, you know, obviously this is a lighter time in the, you know, in Starscream's life, but he's just like too darn happy. He's like, hey man, check me out. But it's fine. You still got Mike Spicer who does the colors in here, so it still, you know, has that tone. But this is very much a story that has to deal with Starscream when he's all bright-eyed and has the whole world in front of him. The war is just getting started, and he winds up seeing his friend pretty much perish before his eyes. And so ever since that time, when it was right in front of Optimus Prime, he's kind of wanted revenge on the Autobots for that, right? And so he joins Megatron and the others. And I thought this page was actually kind of cool, right? And you wind up getting to see another huge kind of cliffhanger in this comic book that is all tying into the Energon universe, and it does have to do with Starscream, and let's just say that Starscream ain't quite done yet, right? So this made for a very cool comic book. However, it wasn't my strongest or my favorite issue. It's still going to get an A, but it's going to get an A- this time around, and not a top pick for me. But it still was really good. So curious to see where we go with issue 14 and Starscream's journey. So there you have it, webheads. There are all my thoughts on the rest of the comic books that I read for this week. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Let me know in the comments section below. And like I said, I'm going to leave you that video of Worthy Ones in case you haven't checked it out. This is the video where I talk about all the newest number ones that I read for the current comic book week. And as always, guys, remember, support the local comic shops. Keep buying, keep collecting, but always read your comics so we can have great comic conversation just like we did today. Guys, thank you so much for the support, and I'll see you on the next one.